welcome to another episode of the Reminger Report Podcast on emerging technologies. I'm Zach Pyers, and I'm here today with my associate, Mackenzie Compton, who's joining us. Thank you for joining us, Mackenzie.
Thanks so much for having me, Zach. I'm really excited to talk about this topic.
And the topic we're going to be talking about today is artificial intelligence, the use and regulation in the legal field. Now, I know that this has been a topic that has been discussed by a lot of legal practitioners over the last couple of years. There's been a lot of myths, shall we say, talking about legal artificial intelligence in the legal field. There have been some cautionary tales, we'll say. And so I'm happy to have you on here to discuss this topic for all of our listeners today. So if you would, just real quick, can you introduce yourself and just tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name's Mackenzie Compton. I've actually been at Reminger for about 2 months. I'm in my 3rd year of practice, and so far I've been loving it. I'm very privileged to get to work with you and the rest of our professional liability silo down here in Columbus, and it's been great. I'm very passionate about how technology can impact the law and the legal practice and how we need to adapt moving forward.
Great. So if you would, just give our listeners kind of an overview. What types of AI or artificial intelligence are being used today as it relates to kind of the legal practitioners?
So really from that 1,000-foot view, we're talking about 2 different types of technology. So you have lay resources like ChatGPT, the big one that we always hear about, Google Gemini, Microsoft CoPilot. There are countless software companies that have come out with their own versions of what we would call generative AI. And these are the ones that are really being talked about, where you can input different information and the output will be anything from motions to stories to songs. There's just a litany of different things that you can do with this. And then the other category that we have is legal resources that have just gotten into the game. So the traditional legal resources like Westlaw and Lexis have come out with their own software, sometimes working in a cooperation with those lay resources to bring the expertise that they have, like shepherdizing cases and making sure that we're pinpointing to really specific good legal information instead of just drawing from all over the internet like other AI programs do.
So tell us, what are some of the positives we're seeing as it relates to the use of artificial intelligence? I know, that some people have gone so far as to predict that the entire downfall of the legal profession, because we will all be replaced by artificial intelligence. But as it stands right now, and I think some in society would suggest that the replacement of all lawyers might be an improvement to our society, but that's neither here nor there. When we talk about the positives to the use of AI as it exists now, what are we seeing?
So really, we're not at a point where anyone needs to worry about attorneys being replaced. The software is not quite there yet. So the fact that some people think that we're going to be eliminated by it is a little bit alarmist. There are a lot of great things that AI can do. It's a great jumping off point for research, especially on some of these niche topics where you might not know where to start. It can help save time with that research. It can save time with some drafting. There's a lot of e-discovery tools that help with voluminous document review. Some people believe that the work is higher quality. I think that's dependent upon the software that you're using. It can also reduce attorney stress and frustration. And it can also help the office run a little bit more smoothly.
Now, obviously, whenever there's positives, there's usually negatives as well. What have we seen in the legal industry as some of the drawbacks of the use of artificial intelligence?
So immediately when I think about talking about AI in the context of the legal community, I think about the whataboutism. What about those 2 guys from New York? A lot of attorneys are pointing to, quote, the 2 guys from New York as a very bad example of why AI should not be allowed to go forward in the legal profession. So if you'd let me, I'd like to clear up a little bit of the mystery surrounding them.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about how there's myths, right, surrounding some of this. And so I would love to hear anything that helps to clarify or clear up those myths.
Yeah, so those fabled New York attorneys are actually named Schwartz and LaDuca. And they were beginning to use AI in their practice. And one of the ways that they were doing that is they used ChatGPT, which is a lay resource that takes information from all different types of websites and compiles it. So you have Wikipedia, Reddit, maybe you'll get some legal information in there. And they wrote a brief using it and they submitted it to the court. The court called them out on it. And rather than say, hey, we made a mistake, we won't use it again, here's a new brief that we've written with all of the appropriate citations, because the big problem was that they had used incorrect citations or case hallucinations. So rather than just admit that they made a mistake, they doubled down, used ChatGPT again in their response to the court with more fake cases, and they ended up being sanctioned.
Now, when you say hallucinations, can you, case hallucinations, tell me what that means.
So a case hallucination is, let's take the abortion case Roe versus Wade, for example. That's one that a lot of people know. So if we consider I'm writing a brief about access to abortion, I could say, what's the leading case law on it? And it could say Doe versus Jade, right? We got like 2 letters that get flipped there. So it's a fake case, it doesn't exist. So while there might be law out there that would match some case that exists, what ChatGPT has done is it's just cobbled together a bunch of random information into something that sounds right, might even look right. It could be a beautiful citation that you'd get from the best attorney, but it's bad information.
So hallucination would, and let me see if I can summarize this. Hallucination would be information that looks like case law, but may not necessarily be the correct holding and or may not actually have a correct case citation because the case that is being cited may not actually exist as legal precedent. Is that fair?
That's a great summary.
Okay. Now, as it relates to the legal profession, are there any existing regulations that apply to the use of artificial intelligence in practice?
Yes. So when we consider our existing regulations, the major source right now is the rules of professional conduct. And those govern our day-to-day practice, no matter what we do. And they have a lot of really salient information for AI. So one of the rules that comes to mind first is Rule 1.1, competence. The rule states that a lawyer shall provide competent representation to a client, requiring legal knowledge, skill, thoroughness, and preparation reasonably necessary for representation. So specifically, there is a comment to that rule that extends that responsibility into technology. So it requires attorneys to maintain the requisite knowledge and skill and keep abreast of changes in the law, including benefits and risks associated with the relevant technology.
And artificial intelligence is that new technology.
Absolutely. That's the new technology that would refer to. So when Schwartz and LaDuca in interviews stated that they never thought that ChatGPT might create a hallucinated case, this is where the rule says that's not an excuse. You need to understand how to use the technology and how to put it into your practice in a way that's going to benefit your clients and also maintain the standards that are required.
Have there been any regulations that you're aware of that have been specifically created, right, for artificial intelligence, as opposed to the comment you referenced, I mean, has been in effect for, at least a decade, if not longer, as it relates to technology. I remember years and years ago that the comment was cited when a practitioner, not here in Ohio where we're located, but in another jurisdiction, was unable to electronically file something in a federal court and refused to go through the e-filing training, and then finally had one of his staff members pretend to be him, log in and get the e-filing training, and then he still managed to mess up the e-filing and was finally suspended from the practice in that specific district court because he could not figure out how to use his computer. And he was eventually referred to this rule in the comments, or the comment of Rule 1.1 as it relates to competency, that said, from a technology standpoint, you should at least know how to e-file. Even if you delegate the task to one of your staff members, you still are responsible for knowing how to do it. So that comment's been around. That was a
Yeah.
long-winded way of saying the comment's been around, I know, for a long time. Have we seen any specific regulations being implemented at AI in a more recent time frame?
We have. So again, there's a lot of different regulations, and I think we can really sort of summarize it under 3 buckets. So first, we have sort of the standing all-out bans. And I'd actually like to share the language of Ohio's what is being referred to as a ban, but it's a standing order from the Southern District of Ohio, specifically in Judge Newman's court. And it states, no attorney may use artificial intelligence in the preparation of any filing submitted to the court. It goes on to say that the court does not intend that the AI ban is stated in the rule, to apply to information gathered from legal search engines such as Westlaw or Lexis or internet search engines like Google or Bing. So that's really a specific ban on ChatGPT. The court has also said that anyone who violates those regulations is subject to sanctions. Pleadings can also be stricken if they find that you've used AI. So that is about the strictest ban that I saw in my research on this topic.
That is a pretty strict. That is a pretty strict ban. And it's interesting. I mean, as you read this, right? Because I know, and we just talked about that both, Lexis and Westlaw, who are discussed in that order as being permissible, do have certain features available that are approaching what we would consider to be more similar to ChatGPT, in that they're offering artificial intelligence in some forms outside of just the legal research. So it's interesting that they're kind of drawing this distinction, or the court, because I think there's probably some ambiguity in that order that probably raises a couple of questions as to whether Westlaw or Lexis or another legal software provider's artificial intelligence would be prohibited or permissible.
We are dealing with very, very complex technology here, and that there's a lot of nuance to how different things operate. So it's important that when rules are being made, the people making the rules understand the technology, consult people who have a really good working knowledge of how it works to be able to point out the ways in which maybe Lexis and Westlaw are like ChatGPT in some ways and cannot be relied upon as heavily as some courts may think, or that maybe there's more capability with some of the lay sources than we think. It's certainly interesting to see how everything's shaking out.
Yeah. And how do attorneys handle some of these regulations moving forward?
So moving forward, what I would suggest that attorneys do is get familiar with the AI. If you're going to use it, you need to have a really great working knowledge. What can I rely on this particular program for? Can I use this for legal research? Is it going to produce good work product? Second, like you would with any kind of filing, familiarize yourself with the requirements of each jurisdiction that you're filing in, because another one of the ways that regulations are coming into play is some courts like Central District of California, Texas courts, Northern District of California, and specific New York counties are requiring that if you're going to file something, you have to file an additional affidavit or a written statement swearing that you have not used AI, or that if you have checked all of the work, you've shepherdized your cases and have made sure that there's no hallucinations. So making sure that you're complying with local rules is really important. And then finally, I think this is just good advice across the board. Sort of treat whatever AI you're using the way that you would treat work given to you or turned into you by another associate, a colleague. If someone's turning in work to you, you're going to check that. You're going to make sure that everything looks okay. You might jeopardize some cases, but just do that final run through to make sure that everything is okay.
Do you see, kind of as you're reading through the tea leaves, so to speak, do you see any future regulations being needed or added by, either high level people, like, for example, here in Ohio, the Ohio Supreme Court, or, on a court by court basis, or maybe the ABA addresses this. Do you see that coming or as necessary?
It's pretty helter-skelter right now. So different bar associations, state bars, everyone seems to be coming up with some kind of guidance, but what we really need is something that is comprehensive. So if the Supreme Court could come out with rules that say this is specifically what we're looking for when it comes to AI, that could apply to all jurisdictions instead of having maybe to file an affidavit in Franklin County, or not being able to use ChatGPT in Cleveland, just making sure that everything is sort of lining up uniform in a way that is not imposing an additional hardship on parties when they're filing things.
Great. Mackenzie, I appreciate your time today. I appreciate you educating us on the use of artificial intelligence in the legal field. It was certainly helpful and enlightening to my understanding of it, so I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.